Well, hello, everyone. We're back and ready for another conversation. My name is Byron Odian, and I have Sulani Madsen, Gregory Mango, my wife Raven Odian, and since Roger Haynes can't be with us this time, we invited Kaylee Triller Harms to join us as a red. Say hello, gang.
Hello.
Okay, hello.
Hello.
Well, for this podcast, we've decided to pick a topic which is patriotism. We will be using a Braver Angel style fishbowl discussion. Today we have two blues, Gregory and Raven, and two reds, Sulani and Kaylee. I will be sitting this one out. One group will stay on mic and share their views for 10 minutes on the topic of patriotism. Then we switch, and the other group will be on mic while the group that shared first listens. The goal is to see how the other side sees the issue and discover common ground. The real work in this exercise is done by the silent observers whose task it is to listen and learn. We will then talk about what each group learned from listening. We have decided to do a coin toss to determine who goes first. Sulani, call it, heads or tails?
Tails.
It's heads.
Okay.
Okay.
Blues get to go first.
All right.
Okay.
The rest of us will all turn our videos off so that you two have the Zoom room to yourself.
Hi, Raven.
Hey, Gregory.
Yeah, do you want to begin by answering the question, what experiences inform your definition of patriotism?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that watching the news during the Vietnam War and seeing the death toll scroll every night on the screen, then being affected by the 60s with the anti-war movement and also sort of the back to the land movement where people were picking holes in the state rather than agreeing with everything that was happening. Yeah, I'll just say that. How about you, Gregory?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I've never really thought about this particular question before. I feel like what I consider patriotism, I guess, is just feeling a sense of belonging in America, right? Like I'm an American. And so I think of the country as like a larger version of my family, right? So I didn't really choose it, but I'm sort of born into kind of a sense of loyalty to it and a sense of connection to it that's in some way deep, right? But if I think about the question, what do I love about America? Like if I want to make it concrete, or how did I grow to love particular things about America? I would have to say it comes from my experience as a queer kid growing up in Ohio, a million miles away from like where there was a notion of a gay rights or gay liberation movement, right? So growing up really lost. So that's the one end of the spectrum. It wasn't that experience, but it was the changes that happened to the country over the next 40 years to where my marriage rights are now recognized by the country. And what is it about the country that made that kind of change possible over time? Really feels like something that makes me love America more than I would just from being born here.
So for you, patriotism is loving your country and appreciating your country. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean a sense of like familial loyalty.
Yeah, and I think for me, I would say that I would define it that way as well. And because I came from such a dysfunctional family, I didn't transfer that sense of familiar bond to my country. And so I think I was more easily primed to see the problems when I was younger. And it's so interesting because as I've gotten older, also I was a horrible student in school for numerous reasons. But history made no sense to me. I could not wrap my head around all the numbers and dates and battles. Just, you know, couldn't grasp it. And now that I'm an older woman, I love history and I read a lot of history, and it's given me more of an appreciation and more of a love for my country through understanding what it took to even create America, the United States. I mean, you know, it was truly a phenomenal thing at the time. And my appreciation for the ideals have grown, because without that, we wouldn't have had the Voting Rights Act, which unfortunately has been dismantled, but we wouldn't have had that. We wouldn't have had women's rights. We wouldn't have had, you know, women being able to vote, people of color being able to vote. 13th Amendment, we wouldn't have had birthright citizenship for people, 14th Amendment. So I think that my understanding of history has allowed me to have a greater appreciation for the ideals of the United States.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I resonate really strongly with that. I was thinking earlier, as I was just generally thinking about patriotism, like what do we mean by America? I feel like what do you mean by America, or what do you mean by your country,
Yeah.
is an important part of shaping what you mean by patriotism. And I think of America as a project, as a long-term project with an egalitarian impulse, right? That's trying to expand what it means to be American, right? Like including more in different people that maybe at the beginning, or definitely at the beginning, would not have been
Definitely at the beginning.
considered qualified in some way, right? Because of their race, because of their religion, because of their nationality. And so expanding into that spaciousness of what it means to be an American, and that all the incredible sacrifice and blood that's been shed for that ideal, right, is really crucial to what I mean by patriotism.
Yeah, I totally feel that, what you're saying, Gregory, and it brings me to the question of nationalism,
Right.
because nationalism, which I just found out because I didn't know the definition, is specifically about a group that shares a religion, culture, and
Ethnicity.
language and ethnicity. And we are not that. We are not a nation by that definition. So patriotism, nationalism are completely different to me based on that definition. And I resonate with that definition. That's why I brought it up, obviously, because we are a pluralistic society. All men, quote unquote, are created equal, to me says we're all created equal. And they just weren't enlightened at the time to include everybody else besides white men at the time. That is the ideal. And that's, we are. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I just want to respond to they weren't enlightened, to shift that to it isn't that they became enlightened, it's that they were forced to include the people that they had excluded, right?
Oh, yes, right. I
Yeah.
mean, right. Changes
You
only
know
happen
that,
through,
right?
yeah, changes only, yes, absolutely, Gregory.
So my take on nationalism is that it's like uncritical devotion to the country based on like some mythology of greatness,
Right.
which is a lot of times rooted in ethnicity or race or something like that. But it doesn't have to be. Or you can define that. You can define what the nation is in a lot of ways, but
Right.
to be devoted to it in a way that's uncritical, that it can do no wrong,
Right.
and that there's an us versus them. Like Americans are special and somehow deserve to dominate other countries or the world, or to say that certain people don't belong here,
Right.
right? like we welcome immigration, but only from some countries, or
Yeah.
some kinds of people are welcome,
Mhm.
which is a lot of the history of America, that's been the case. But
That's right.
I feel like it's not in our, what's the word I'm looking for? But it isn't the vision. It isn't the vision.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to make one more point about patriotism, Gregory, is that it's the word can be used as a club, and it's been used against me that way, where if you happen to criticize anything about the government or the way things are done, somebody doesn't like it and they just club you with, well, you're not patriotic. And to me,
Well,
that's not patriotism. Patriotism is being able to criticize where you see there's a problem, which is why we have the Second Amendment in the first place. So,
and the First Amendment.
and the First Amendment, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I think you meant the First Amendment.
Yes, I
Oh,
did. Well, that's why we have the Second Amendment too, so that I can pull out my gun when I want to. You can cut that,
right.
Byron.
Well, I agree 100% with
I
that.
meant the first.
So good place to close.
Yeah.
All righty then. Yeah. Nice job, you guys. So now we're going to reverse roles. Raven and Gregory are going to go off screen, and welcoming in Sulani and Kaylee to this fishbowl. Have at it.
It's really interesting to go second because it's so tempting to respond to what I just heard. But I think we need to have our own conversation, and starting with that definition of what is patriotism and what has informed our individual experiences. Why don't you go first, Kaylee? You had a really interesting story the other day about how that felt doing the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah, sure. So growing up, I mean, first of all, I'd like to say I think I pretty much share the definitions of both patriotism and nationalism that I've already heard today. That's largely how I experience it and how I interpret things. But even growing up, I think there was this sense of America is the greatest country on earth. Like, I don't know where I heard that, but I did absorb that messaging. And I didn't challenge it, and I didn't necessarily see a need to. And, patriotism was being proud of your country and grateful for the sacrifices that were made to allow for other people's freedoms. And I still think that that is something worth celebrating. I did remember growing up, though, feeling a little bit weird. I think this is what you were talking about. When we would stand and cover our hearts and say a pledge of allegiance to a flag. And I mean, I have always been a little bit over analytical, but I remember even as a kid thinking, what am I saying? Like, I pledge allegiance to a flag, a nation. Like, you're 5, 6 years old. That's kind of a tall order. What am I agreeing to? What are the terms? Like, what if my country does something bad? Why are my loyalties here? And that did, and still, if I'm honest, feels a bit cult-like to me. A little bit like, conservatives are going to kill me for this, but like, feels a little indoctrinating. Like, we're forcing kids to agree to some sort of loyalty code that, like, maybe they need to work out when they're a little bit older. But so for me, that was always a little bit weird. But I didn't hate it. I just, it was just kind of like, huh, what's this? But I remember, I mean, I can still recite all the words to songs like America the Beautiful and My Country 'Tis of Thee, Sweet Land of Liberty. And, some of the verses still make me cry. And I do, my heart wells up and I feel pride and gratitude. And, even in my family, Alexander Hamilton's like my great, 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 great grandpa. So that was some way I felt connected to, like, this greatness and this amazing feat and these people who were brave and strong and they sacrificed a lot of things. And I think everybody kind of wants to feel anchored to an identity of something that's worth aspiring to, that's greater than themselves. And so for me, that's patriotism. And I think that patriotism has been a really great force for good in the world. And it saddens me. I'm happy to hear the guests today saying that they still think it's a good thing, because in recent history for me, it has felt almost like I'm supposed to be ashamed that I'm not allowed to be patriotic. There's kind of performative self-flagellation. America's terrible and we should all be embarrassed. And and I don't necessarily feel that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I probably hadn't given it much thought at all
Hmm.
until high school. And we grew up doing the Pledge of Allegiance, and we had campfire meetings. We would say that, and and I have always been rather fond of rituals, and so I had always experienced it just as this is like singing "Happy Birthday" before blowing out the birthday candles, or singing the doxology after the offering. I mean, it was a piece of a shared statement that says we're all together, and we're all together as family. It does feel familial to me, and I have a very large and very functional extended family. So for me, that's a very positive connotation. In that extended family, there's a fair number of veterans, past, present, and current, who formed how I feel about that patriotism. Is that this flag represents what all of those in my family had sworn to protect, to actively participate in being part of shaping the country. That's patriotism. That active participation is a piece of it. So in high school, which is during the Vietnam War, and I was the awkward, skinny kid that didn't talk to cool people. And so one of the cool people came up to me on a day when there was going to be a protest the next day. And so there were going to be two competing protesting camps. And I took one of the armbands. Each side was picking up armbands to put on. And he asked if I would join in. And I said yes. So I went home with this armband, and I'm sitting on the couch telling my little sister about this cool kid talked to me. My father comes in. My father's a history teacher. He's a Coast Guard veteran. And he just asked, and I don't know what my parents' politics were. And I still couldn't tell you exactly, because that's not something we talked about. Service was, but not politics. And he asked me, so why did you take that one? Well, I knew absolutely the wrong answer was because this cool guy asked me, he would never talk to me other. That was the wrong answer. I knew that. And so I came up with a defense. I thought through and realized I did have a reason. And what I told him was that I took the one with the flag on it, not the one that had what was supposed to be like a splash of blood. I took the one with the flag on it because it's my country, and I am part of it. And I have to be supportive. And if I think it's doing the wrong thing, I need to be active, and I need to help be part of making it better and keeping it on track. And I still feel that same way. That's the feelings that come back to me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance and in seeing the flag. It's not being uncritical, but it is about being loyal. And if I ever felt that I couldn't be loyal, just as if you were in a truly dysfunctional family, you would need to leave. But if I ever felt that it was that dysfunctional, that would be what I'd have to do. I'd have to do like Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was patriotic until his country grew so totally dysfunctional that he had to resist. We're not anywhere near that kind of point. There are some folks who seem to think that we are, but I really don't think that we're anywhere near that kind of point. We still have the potential to be a functional family if we just do like the Brave Angels marriage counseling, family counseling process, which is one of the reasons I like being involved with Brave Angels. The nationalism part, you had said that both of those definitions kind of resonated with you, and until this came up as a possible topic, I would have said they were the same thing. I wouldn't really see a distinction, other than that patriotism seems a little bit more about emotions and connection, and nationalism is a little bit more about drawing boundaries.
Interesting.
Dan, what Raven was saying about nations generally being defined by a shared language, a shared ethnicity, and we don't have that, which is why it really hurt me to see the battle start up over the Star Spangled Banner at a football game. It's just supposed to be a nice ritual. Everybody sings the song. You don't think all about the words a whole lot. And it's just like, this says, yep, we're all here. We're all in the same place. We're all on the same side. And then it had to get turned into a fight.
I really struggled with that. And again, I feel like I'm supposed to be here representing conservatives, and I am not towing the line. So I apologize. But I really struggled with that. I'm raising a biracial son in North Idaho. So it's an interesting situation. He has been called the N-word. And when I watched what was happening, while I do not agree with BLM as a movement. I don't agree with their proposed solutions to the problems that they name. I think the problems that they name are very real. I feel like there are, people who are alive today who heard the national anthem from the colored section of the bleachers, and I have to
Mhm.
imagine that that would make an impact on how that, and so I don't think that we've resolved all racism, and I feel like my ancestors fought for the freedom for these people to protest too. So, while, I stand for the anthem because I want to honor the sacrifices that were made, I also understand that those sacrifices afford people the liberty to say, "Wait, we still have problems." And so, to me, it wasn't the end of the world. I don't even know how many conservative friends I lost when I said, "Let them kneel." Like, go
Oh, I
ahead.
was just gonna say it's not like it felt like the end of the world. It felt like
Yeah.
this is just bad strategy, right? It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
it was just dumb. You are a well-paid entertainer at an entertainment function, and why are you picking this as I mean, it's just so I guess it was I saw it as a stupid strategy, and
Mm,
it did not lead to anybody paying attention to the problems. All it did was start a fight. And
right.
and that I don't find terribly useful. And I'm a pragmatic libertarian. And I like to do things that work.
Right.
And doing things that don't work, that aren't useful, I find that I struggle with greatly.
I mean, I guess it depends on what your metric is, because I would say it did start conversations. I don't know that it's all a loss, but yeah, and I do think from where I sit to nationalism, I think it's so closely linked to my absolute disdain for Christian nationalism, which is, kinist and racist and sexist and all of those things. To me, nationalism bears a connotation of excess. It's excess loyalty. It's arrogance. It's enforcement of your identity on other people who don't share it. To me, that's what it means. But I understand that you're operating with a different, yeah.
Right. And I
What's
understand where you're
happened to my
coming from
son
with
is
that too,
different,
because
but yeah,
that's something that I'm learning about. Because that's
sure,
in my world, it's not something that I've run into. That's not the church tradition that I come out of. And so it hasn't been part of my world. So that
sure,
just means I have to push myself to learn more about
sure.
that piece. Um, I One of the other questions here was, are they different, and in what way? I can understand what you're saying about excess. I had an interesting experience in the Baltic countries. One of the things that kept Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia intact as countries was a nationalism based on ethnicity and language, but mostly language. All three of those countries kept their languages, kept them alive, whether they were under the Swedish crown, whether they were under the Russian crown. And they've only had very brief periods of independence. And I was able to visit with the Ag Forestry Leadership Program, Latvia and Lithuania in 2008. It was really interesting to listen to folks from another country explaining where their patriotism and where their nationalism came from, and how that language was such a glue holding them together. It gives me a better appreciation, for instance, for the executive order about declaring a national language. I've always wondered, why didn't we just say we have one language? We can use a whole bunch of them. There's no reason we can't use a whole bunch of them. But couldn't we say that we have one? Somehow it feels like for patriotism, for healthy nationalism, we need to go back to finding what we have in common and respecting that, as these are things that we're going to hold together. We can argue about everything else, but we're always, there's always going to be turkey on Thanksgiving dinner, whatever it is, just those few things. I'm looking forward to the next step of this fishbowl, where we get to interact and say what we learned, and what surprised us, and what we learned about each other's points of view.
Yeah. So let's open it up. Raven and Gregory are back. And so we're all present here again. And yeah, let's open this up. Anybody want to start?
Yeah, what we all want to think about, what's something that we each were maybe surprised by or learned, and what did we each hear that was common ground? And just very briefly, I think I heard all of us seeing patriotism as a healthy family. It's a familial connection for in a healthy family sense.
This is outside of what you just gave us a parameters for, Solani, but I just want to respond to the language piece, if I may.
Certainly.
I have a different perspective about declaring English our language. I think it's unnecessary. There is no language that is going to replace English in the United States. I'm studying Spanish because I think it's really important to have that ability. We are one of the nations that does not speak multiple languages in the same way other citizens of the world do. Most other citizens of the world are at least bilingual, at least because they learn English. And I feel a little touchy about it because I feel like it's heading in that exceptionalism lane, like English is superior. And I know that's not what you mean by it, Sulani. I get that.
Yeah.
You're thinking more of, our national identity.
I'm looking at it as a symbolic statement. I'm studying German, but my rationale is that I want to be able to read some grandparents' letters because half of my family is very recent immigrants.
Mhm.
And the other reason is because I enjoy travel and I would like to have a second language on hand for when we are traveling. And you find German tourists all over the world, although most of them speak English.
Yeah. Yeah. The other piece about the reason I chose to study Spanish in the first place was because my mother watches Fox News. And I don't know how many times I walked in and it was on, and somebody on the television was saying, everybody should speak English, slamming Spanish speakers. And I just got tired of hearing that. And so I decided as my political act, I was going to learn Spanish. And the upside is that there are people that I just was able to speak it today when I went to a Mexican restaurant. So it's useful as well.
Oh, I think that's fun. That's a great kind of political resistance that you've chosen. It's very practical.
Exactly, Solani. And I was all for Colin kneeling, actually. It's his right to protest. And then I watched Fox News blow it up. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I found
I
it
hear what
just
you're saying
annoying.
about it was not a good strategy. And, back to the topic. Sorry, folks.
Gregory.
Oh yeah. Just one quick thing about the English thing. I think there's been a lot written about like historically why that decision was made not to do that in the past. And so I would just invite people, because I haven't read anything about that recently, I would just invite people to Google that. Because I think there were some deep thinking about it.
It could be a whole other conversation we could have. So.
Yeah.
Maybe we could just make a whole episode on this topic. But moving back to the original topic, I just want to say I was surprised, Kaylee, by your frankly, what's the word, critical of conservatism perspectives. Like that's not exactly the language I'm groping for, but to hear you articulate positions that were outside the mainstream of conservatism was surprising and refreshing, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness about that, especially about Colin, because I know the kneeling thing was very controversial and inflammatory for a lot of conservatives. And then the Pledge of Allegiance thing is surprisingly, because I never thought of it as a kid at all, or until people started like suing about it, like in the late 80s or something. And I was like, oh, I wonder about that. But I never really felt strongly about it, but like something to really put a lot of energy into, like having an opinion one way or the other. But I appreciated that you had that critical perspective as a grade school kid, and was surprised to hear that given your general conservative leanings.
Well, thank you for that. I also have to say I was grateful. I think I had entered this conversation expecting to have to defend patriotism. I wasn't going to defend nationalism because I won't, but I thought that, my husband and I had a conversation not too long ago we were driving around North Idaho, and this is Trump territory, and I did not vote for him, but this is where we live. I'm in the thick of it. And I came from Western Washington, which is very, very blue. And so it's kind of a culture shock for me. I've only been here for about 6 years. But when we were talking about, what percentage of homes in America that fly an American flag do you suspect are probably conservatives? And my guess is probably upwards of 90%, because I do feel like there has been, I don't know if it's a subtle or unspoken or if it is spoken, but like a sense that we're supposed to be embarrassed to be patriotic at all. And my husband looks the part. I mean, he's this big bald white guy and he carries guns, and I think we went to an event in Seattle and somebody took a picture of my husband and posted it on Facebook and said that he was one of the Proud Boys, and which I can't stand the Proud Boys. Like, nothing in common with the Proud Boys. I think they're terrible, right? But just because of the way he looks, and so there is this sense that we've kind of had to hide any sense of gratitude or pride or anything about America, with much of the left. And so to zoom in and hear, oh no, patriotism is good. That was refreshing for me. So thank you.
Well, I like the way the conversation is going because we did pick a topic. We picked a topic that could potentially be divisive. And we've had good conversations that we've occasionally gotten off track because of something. And that's how a good conversation goes, right? You sit down with friends and all of a sudden you're just talking about something that you didn't start out with. And we had a little side trail to language, but we found a lot of common ground, I think. And I feel really good that I'm hearing from 4 people here who really want things to be better, who want the country to succeed. We may have some different ways of getting there. And that really is the whole point of having conversations like this, is if you can get past the talking points and the things that are said to be inflammatory, we can find those common grounds. One of the interesting things is shutting up long enough to listen. I mean, how often do any of us just sit and listen for 5 or 10 minutes to pick up on what people are saying? Boy, this is really good training for that. How did you experience the listening side? Was that hard? Was it easy?
I found it surprisingly easy. I think there's like a bias built into the public discourse where the people who are the loudest are also the most extreme. And so when we listen to public people talking about these issues, they usually stake out the most extreme position and they demonize the other side. Because one of the things I heard that didn't surprise me, but actually sounded very familiar, was feeling shamed for being conservative, or feeling like, oh no, what you said, Kaylee, was feeling like as an American, you're supposed to feel ashamed or participate in some kind of self-flagellation. And I feel like that's a vibe, for lack of a better word, that is like extrapolated from the amount of time that people on the left spend in critical mode.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
We focus a lot on the problems, completely admit that, own that, feel that that's important, because because we're idealists and we're noticing the difference between our ideals and where we are. And so we focus on how we're missing that mark. And then people who maybe just aren't in that vibe, they just hear complain, and America's bad, and then those public figures again who are staking out the most extreme position, they're like, the left wants you to feel ashamed. They don't want you to fly the flag, or whatever it is. And then
That's a great
it
insight,
comes all the way
Gregory.
around, and people on
Great
the left are
insight.
afraid to fly the flag because somebody will think they're conservative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a really great insight, Gregory. I appreciate that. Part of the Brave Angels thing is each tribe, red and blue, has got to reel in the extremes so that we can have better conversations in the middle. And as long as those loud extremes are dominating the conversation, we're not going to make much progress.
Yeah, I found the listening to be easy, Solani. It wasn't difficult. There was no point at which I felt like I had to bust in and say no. So yeah, it was great
Okay, so now we've concluded that listening is hard for me.
Oh, okay. So the listening part was hard for you. That was my next question. How was it for you, Solani?
Oh, I was extremely shy until sometime in my mid 30s, I found my voice, and I haven't stopped. I'm making up for lost time. So now I always want to say something.
Well, I'd like to share just a little bit, and that's my own perspective, which I'm feeling kind of schizophrenic. One is that I'm with Kaylee, and my hand on my heart just wasn't cutting it in any time. Still today. No, the flag for me is like a piece of cloth, and I don't resonate with it. I don't identify with it. It's not a part of at the same time, that's one side. The other side is that I'm kind of numb. I intentionally wasn't in the armed services. And I'll say that there's a part of me that I hold very dear, and I knew if I went to boot camp or something, that would be tried to be taken away. And so I knew intuitively that that's not someplace I want to go. But at the same time, people have died. Many people have died over, for the flag, for the ideals that the flag represents. And so I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm feeling a little something in my chest that I resonate with as sadness. That I'm not more in connection with the price that people have paid so that I can be here and have the privilege to either wave the flag with pride or burn it, my own flag, not somebody else's, but my own, given, that's a right that I have that's been hard fought for. So wrapping up, that's kind of where I'm at.
Along with language, another interesting conversation would be attitudes towards military and our understanding of what it means to be in military service. And I'm not going to start that rabbit trail right now, but
I'm writing it down. I'm writing it down for a topic. Yeah, that's
yeah,
a good
yeah,
one. That was a good one.
it would be. What does it mean? And what does it mean to be in service? And I'm hoping that as part of this podcast, we are being in service to the country in a way. We have to get dialogue going again. One of the things that I was reading this last week talked about how Tocqueville found such value in how Americans would always form associations to solve problems and gather together. And we used to do that physically. And there were Elks, Moose, Lions, Rotarians, Kiwanis, all the service clubs everywhere that where people got together and worked on stuff. And when people are mission focused, we are less likely to be torn apart by pieces of cloth or flags or pledges, or we're focused on the mission. So patriotism to me is really about focusing on the mission. And the mission for this podcast is to make it possible for people to start using social media as well as their own circles of friends to reconnect, to stay in association, to remember that we are mission focused for our healthy communities, healthy families. Nobody's pushing against that. And we just got to figure out how to get there and get there together.
Well, that's a really good point, Sulani. And I think what we're doing, what we're role modeling here, what we're doing is we're having a dialogue. And I believe on social media that there's a tendency to think monologue, it's posing as dialogue, but it's actually two monologues, or multiple monologues going along. And yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, so I've enjoyed this dialogue. I want to thank everybody for coming online. We'll keep doing these again, maybe every other week or so, and hope that we're sharing something useful to our fellow citizens, our fellow Americans.
Thanks, Solani. Thanks, Byron.
Thanks, Silani. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Kaylee.
Of course, it was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Gregory.
Yeah. Good to see all of you.
All righty. Until next time.